Hey, welcome everybody. We have a full panel here for a great digital workplace call. I'm excited to get this thing started. My name is Neil Miller. I am the host of The Digital Workplace and pleased to bring you this great panel talking about what is digital culture. We have 5 amazing panelists here that I'm excited to introduce you to as we go along. We are going to start off with a check-in question for everybody as we go through, just to set the standard. The question I'm going to ask everybody is, what is your favorite smell? I'm going to start with Lavanya, who is Director of Operations at Chargebee. What is your favorite smell, Lavanya?
Lemons.
Lemon.
Already citrusy? Yeah.
All right. Do you like them like fresh off the tree or like in a dish? Anything specific?
I think fresh off the tree. I mean, that fresh smell is amazing.
Excellent. Cool. Let's jump over to Jane Piper, who's calling in from Switzerland, organizational psychologist. Jane, what is your favorite smell?
The smell of the sea. Even though I'm calling it from Switzerland, you can tell from my accent, I'm from down under, and I so miss that salty smell of a good ocean.
Excellent. The smell of the sea. I love that. Let's see. Sahin Boydas is CEO of remoteteam.com. Sahin, what is your favorite smell?
Man, I have a lot of smells. Like I use the oil diffusers.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And in the old Ottoman times, when they had like big scientists, they start with the date with apple smell.
Huh.
And I also love sweet orange in the morning and put it in the oil diffusers and smell it. Like I'm very big in smells. Yeah.
Excellent. I love this topic of smell because it's like we haven't really figured out the digital equivalent of the smell-o-vision, whatever it was. So this is great. Jason, who is CEO at LeapGen. Jason, what is your favorite smell?
Thank you, Neil, and great to be here. Thanks for having me. My favorite smell is the smell of freshly cut grass.
Oh.
And I have 2 boys. They're both into sports. They're age 16 and 13. And getting out there the first thing in the morning with them and smelling the freshly cut grass, it feels like we've been reborn. And back to your comment about digital, I think that's kind of where we're at. We're about to be reborn here. So
yeah.
We're all smelling the freshly cut grass right now in one way or another.
And especially I can imagine freshly cut grass that you didn't have to cut, but had one of your sons cut. That's even better.
Exactly.
Great. And last we have Grant Hensel, who's CEO at nonprofit Megaphone. Hey, Grant, what is your favorite smell?
Similar to Vanya, actually lime. I love limes and lime juice, and I put it in all kinds of foods that it doesn't actually belong in, according to my wife. So here we are.
Excellent. My favorite smell is I live in Indiana, a very temperate climate. So like we're entering into the fall season for us, and the smell of fall is amazing, specifically the cottonwood trees, those leaves as they fall. It's just something that like always stirs something inside me. So that is one of my favorite smells. Well, excellent. What we are talking about today is the idea of digital culture. A lot of companies, as they are making this transition, they're experimenting with what it means to transition over to digital platforms for a lot of their work processes. But the one thing that I always hear is, productivity, we can try to manage on digital platforms. Collaboration, we can kind of do. Leadership, we're doing like okay on, but don't touch my culture. Like culture belongs in the office. That's where we left it. As soon as we can get back, we'll get there and everything will be great. But that is not always the case. So I want to look through that issue and try to figure out those things. So my first question to everybody, we'll just kind of pick a few people here because we're going to keep this thing going pretty quickly, is how valid are fears that we are going to lose our culture if we go digital? So you can kind of rank this between, extremely valid, you got to have the in-person element versus it's not a big deal. Let me start with Grant. What's your answer to that one?
We've been remote since day one, and I think have a very strong culture, so it's certainly not impossible. I will say that we do an annual retreat once a year, and we have quarterly leadership team meetings that are in person, which we find a lot of benefit in. We think that it's almost like there's a continuum where if you have 0 in-person interaction ever, I think that has some negative impact, but that you reach diminishing marginal returns relatively frequently. So I don't know if people seeing each other more than once a quarter would be necessary because of all the things that you can do virtually.
Excellent. Great. Jane, let's jump up to you. What do you think?
I think there is definitely a need to be able to connect with people, to be able to develop a culture. There are certain things of a culture that will transmit digitally, the way we do things and processes, which leads to behavior. But an example, I had a friend who started a new job. She's a consultant for one of the big four and shifted to another one of the big four, same job. But basically the culture is so different, and understanding that culture was extremely difficult coming in as a new person. So I think those are the things that we haven't really got processes for yet. They had an online induction, but that didn't give her, how do I get onto the best projects, which is the important question if you're a consultant. So I think there definitely still needs to be some opportunities for people to collaborate together, but it doesn't need full time in the office.
Yeah, great. Sahin, your company is very distributed, so you're not getting together every week or every month even. So what about you? What do you feel about this?
So I was remote. All of my companies was remote for the last 10 years. And in remote, we didn't meet with anyone at all, like zero meetings, zero one the person. But I really believe is totally a new era, like an industrial age. And we cannot bring the office culture to the remote. Remote culture will not work in the office culture. So it's going to be sort of a hybrid that we are learning as we are going. Okay, we did so much remote. Okay, we need human touch, human elements, human relationship, because we are still like humans with souls, I hope. So that's why I think we are going to develop amazing cultures that will work perfectly in the remote world. And I think the benefits of being remote is just unbelievable. People are way happier, way efficient. Companies are way more efficient, cost effective, and you can work wherever you want. It's just something so unbelievable. We don't need to stuck in cities anymore. The whole system will change. Like we are totally entering a new era, and I think we're gonna develop great models there.
Yeah. Jason, that sounds a lot about like stuff you usually talk about and thinking about a new age, a new work that we're in. What is your feel about digital culture? Is that easy to develop, or should people still be afraid of how that's going to happen?
I'd be very afraid. And I'd be very afraid unless we attack it sequentially and intentionally. So I believe that you can develop a digital culture that's stronger than a physical culture. But I think what's very important to what we do is that we take a whole person approach to what that means. So we can't just take physical as a component. We have to take physical, we have to take social, we have to take spiritual, we have to take intellectual, and we have to take knowledge and say, what do I need by persona? This whole concept of human-centered design thinking is really important when it comes to designing culture. And one of the things that companies have been good at over time is just doing a peanut butter spread. Everyone gets the same thing. And in today's world of personalization and individualization, that doesn't work. So if I'm going to create a digital culture that's actually strong and stronger than a physical culture, I need to do it sequentially, but with a whole person approach.
Yeah. Lavanya, I'm most eager to kind of hear what you think of all these responses, because your company is probably the biggest of all the ones that we're talking about here. You're talking about almost 700 people. You're also coming from India, where the office culture is a very strong element and people kind of expect to be together. So where have you been landing on that idea about we're going to lose our culture if we go digital?
No, I think what we've learned in the last year and a half is this is amazing. This is like everybody else says, this is a new era, right? We can't and we won't be able to recreate the office setup or whatever it meant to us back then. So, but we need to be actively invested in and try to figure out what this means and try and shape it together. But I think it needs mindful attention and, a lot of communication as well. I think it's even more important because we're all distributed. We communicate a lot more, we've realized that. But I do think eventually a lot of people in my organization would agree that this is for the better. And we're quite excited where we are from where we were. So.
Excellent. Great to hear. I'm going to turn over the moderator duties to each of you as we kind of go through a little bit. I'm going to start with Grant. Grant's got a question for everybody. Why don't you go ahead?
Absolutely. I'm curious, something that I've been thinking about a lot is, do you feel like in your experiences having a primarily remote environment creates more sort of factions or more like divisions that could potentially arise between like little cliques forming because there's not central meeting places where like everyone's in the same environment and sort of establishing the same norms? Do you see different norms is being established in different sections of a company if it is remote, more so than in person?
I have a very interesting thing on this. If you are 100 people company, right, you probably have maximum 10 office meeting rooms, right? So any even given time that can be like not a lot of meetings, but in remote world, people meet more. So we have actually more time to meet with each other because we have more places to meet in a very weird way. Whenever I go to a big company like Google, Facebook, you never have a meeting room. It's always packed, always reserved. But in remote, you just have these 5 people coming together. And what I realize is we do more meetings in remote than real life. That actually gives us way more opportunities to know each other. And we just not always talk just work. Like we always put like 5-10 minutes to talk about some other things because we have more efficiency in the remote world versus going to office with cars and other means of transportation, right?
But then on the other hand, I've seen some of the research which has come out where they've looked at countries that went into lockdown, and I was interested because one of them was my home country, New Zealand, which had a much shorter lockdown than other places. And in the communication flows, what they saw is, I mean, these are office workers who went to remote and then back to the office, that during that time there was much less connection with the other departments, so that in between departments, so these were probably bigger companies than 100 odd people. So I agree with you, Sahin, you know, this, if everybody, you know, if you just do some clever person did one of those things, you know, when people come in the office, just randomly coming into the office. But I think there is a danger that if you had the existing silos before the going to remote, and then you suddenly move to remote, you need to think about how you will continue to build across silos, because you won't get those spontaneous connections that would happen in an office. So, but I'd be interested to hear from, you know, perhaps Lavanya, who's got a large group of people, whether that's been her experience as well.
Absolutely, Jane. I think particularly, I think within teams, like Sahin said, we were meeting more, a lot more conversations amongst teams, but across, you know, functions, it was a lot harder, right? This would happen organically in the office. You would walk down to the water cooler and say hi to someone else and just have a chat. Now, this had to be engineered as well. So we started creating Slack groups, and, you know, just somebody tried to kick off a conversation every day. So we had to, you know, just be consciously opening out those conversations. But yes, this was hard in the beginning.
And Jane, one of the things you just said, and Grant, back to your question, I want to tie this back. We as leaders of organizations and of whatever size, we mostly work with the Fortune 500, but organizations have to create safe space and trust. That's really important. That these are, you know, if people feel comfortable talking to someone at the water cooler, they should feel comfortable talking to someone on Slack or on Teams or on Zoom or on WebEx without thinking about, hey, what's going to happen? You know, and at the same time, we as organizations can get smart using organizational network analysis to be able to say, hey, guys, there's groups of people who aren't talking that should be talking that manage this account. So I really believe there's pros and cons to this, but I think it starts with creating safe space. And one of the things that we guide organizations on all the time is stop checking up on people and start checking in on people. Okay. And do it cross organization, not within your own team.
And so I think the point there is that you've got an intentional ways or methods of doing what happened perhaps naturally prior.
And just one more thing on that, Jane, you can actually do more. I think Sahin's point about, you know, if we have hour meetings, you know, in the office, you know, how many people can you check in on remotely versus how many people can you check in on in person? Oftentimes you can have a bigger impact, a wider web of connection. And I think that goes back to the other thing that I like to talk about is that we're not just focused on getting people connected. We have to intentionally focus on building connection. And if we can do that, I think that is going to alleviate some of the fears of this culture challenge.
Jason, I think you bring up an interesting point about just mentioning the Fortune 500. Like, there's one thing if you're going into a large office every day, there's like this feeling of, okay, I belong to this big organization. You see all the people that are out there. You see everything that's there. You have all these signals around you that says you're part of this mega group that's there. In my experience in remote work and distributed work is that you don't get that sense of like, if you put me on, like, let's just say like Facebook had a Slack group that was there, and you put me in there, like there'd be, thousands and thousands of people there, but my immediate experience would just be with maybe a few dozen that would be here and there. So there's almost like this breakdown of like, I don't really belong to this huge group. I belong to these smaller groups. And I think what I'm picking from Grant's question is like, is there a limit maybe that you can really only have groups of, again, maybe a few dozen up to 100 or so. And then once it gets beyond that, your sense of belonging to a mega group kind of breaks down from that. I don't know, Grant, what are you feeling from where you're at?
Well, that's what I'm worried about. And James can probably share a lot about, I know there's theories about different numbers of people that can sort of interact as a unified group. We're 50 something and have aspirations to grow significantly. And so I worry about that. Like, at what point do you lose a unified culture? And that might not even be a remote versus in-person thing. That just might be a size thing, but we're trying to figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're probably referring to Dunbar's law, where he said that it was, maximums of groups of around about 50 was what we could hold, and he relates it back to, tribes that we were in and how many connections you can have. I think when you look at that, what's different there is he's talking about often social connections, not how you can connect for work. So I see in organizations, yes, you've got that growth factor you're talking about, but it's the way you then perhaps organize and put people together for project teams so that you can still pull people together that perhaps don't know each other, that perhaps is different than how big a social network that you can have. So often this law is a little misapplied sometimes in the business context, where there's still the opportunity to bring people together. I think the point that Neil was talking about is all those artifacts that make people feel that they belong. Here's the grand office with the sign over the door and the values there, and you see people dressing in a particular way and acting in a particular way. That side of the culture may be more difficult to transmit when you don't have those physical artifacts around to see it. But it's still very possible to actually develop that culture and explain what that culture is to people. And the culture is changing so fast. I've noticed, I don't know about you people, but I've certainly noticed that the whole concept of, say, business dressing has completely disappeared in our home office. So it's the fact that cultures are fragmented. They always were. I worked in very large international companies, and there always was in 19 different countries. You always have layers of culture. To get a unified culture it is impossible. And something you really can't aim for, but what are the key things that you do want to say are really important in your culture, your values? What do you want to keep, and what are the other things that people will do differently?
And I think one of the key words that's come out of this part of this discussion is intentionality.
Oh, yeah.
Intentionality. And I think that when we think about employee experience, and realize that people are humans outside of work, they're still humans inside of work, right? They don't all of a sudden become robots. What drives people together, how they feel, and common areas of interest. So at work, who are you going to chat with? People that run. I like running. Or people that have a similar sports team that they like, a football club, whatever it is. The question is, as I intentionally design the digital culture, I need to create those same opportunities for that level of connection.
Yeah.
And, but once again, it's not going to feel the same as physical. I think that's really important to just state. Like, there's something to be said. The reason I'm in Chicago is I'm meeting with some team members. Why did I come to Chicago? So I could look in people's eyes. Can I look in your eyes, Neil, right now? Totally. Does it feel the same? Not quite.
Yeah.
So it's really important to think about designing intentionally. What are the things that we're going to do in person, and what are the things we're
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm just curious about the video aspect of it from what you're saying, right? And that's something we've been experimenting with, right? And is video really important to building connection? Would you be as sociable, or will you be more transactional? Let's say if it was just audio, or just you were texting somebody. What has your experience been, all of you? I'd love to hear because we've been using video a lot, and that's helped for us.
I want to add something very funny here. So I lived in Cupertino, which is close to the Apple's office. Okay, Apple built, they claim it's 8 billion, but I think let's say it's $10 billion. And the office is empty. They put 10,000 people here. So it means $1 million per person they spend in this office. And when I walk there, I feel that I'm in a hospital or some kind of a special asylum or something, because everywhere is so white. And you go to Google. Google has probably one of the best ridiculous office space on the planet Earth, probably. But when you look around, you see more people not smiling, and you see way less people smiling. So it's always, I think, comes to the point of Jason. Like, you can build the best monuments on the planet Earth, but people are still unhappy, because what makes a place great is the people. It doesn't matter we have the best offices, and I really don't believe in this world, like, if you can put that resources on making people happy, I think Apple can send a massage van to everyone's house and like rotate everyone and still be cheaper when it comes to building a hospital. So human connection is the thing, and we can build relationship with our loved ones. Long distance, we have family members that we don't see many years, and we still have great relationship, and this can be applied to the work as well. And my best friends in life, I rarely see them. I talk with them over the phone all the time. So I believe this can be easily done with the office environment, but the trust and other things is super important. It's all about human connection.
Sahin, just real practically, do you guys have your video on for all of your calls? Always on? What about you, Grant? What about your
So
team?
interesting. We don't do video at all, except for welcome lunches where we're welcoming new people. We took a vote on this, and everyone basically said, I don't want the pressure of having to like look all nice, and so I prefer audio. Which is like,
and there wasn't a middle way, like you can have videos on and it doesn't matter whether you've got your makeup and your hair done and all the rest of it. You can look however you want.
Yeah.
That middle option wasn't there.
It seemed to be, yeah. And maybe we should have had more options. It was funny. It was almost, there was almost a sense that like, even if it was optional, that there would still be implicit like peer pressure, or you'd compare yourself to other people or whatever. And I don't know, it was very interesting, but yeah, I'm fascinated that you guys all are using video, and it sounds like it's been quite successful.
Jason, oh yeah, go ahead, Jane.
No, I was just going to say, I think the interesting thing for me was one of the teams that I work with very regularly, and so regularly have meetings when people went into lockdown. We started using video more. It was never compulsory to use video, but people started using video because people were really starting to feel quite lonely, I think. And without it all being set up, one day somebody's cat walked in, and then we had just a spontaneous moment where the media had stopped and everybody showed their pet without it being show your pet moment. And that, I think, comes back to that comment that you make about human connection. But in that, I also noticed, because people aren't going to the office, we are a lot more casual in how we dress. Like, somebody's going to, because that's the meeting I'm going to next, somebody's going to comment on the fact that I'm more dressed up today for this than I normally would be. And it's definitely shifted, because I remember previously one time they said, oh, welcoming somebody, can you please show yourself on the camera? And I went, oh my God, I've just been for a run and I'm here in a really skanky t-shirt that you can see my sports bra through, and no makeup and the hair not done. And I was worried about that 2 years ago. Now I couldn't care. So, I mean, I think it has definitely shifted about how we feel about things. Yeah, or certainly from my point of view anyway.
And also that element of informality, right? Like cats walking in, roommates, and other things. People in the family just waving out and going away. But with the video, I think we were briefly self-conscious, but then you just get used to it. It's a lot more informal and relaxed. Yeah, I quite like using video.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Have you made a mandate on video, Lavanya, or is it always optional?
It just happened organically, I think. In early. Once we got remote, I think, Krish, our CEO, and, a couple of other leaders just went and said, hey, it'll be nice to see everybody and let's stay connected. And that kind of set the tone. And then we started turning video on, and then it just became a thing. So very rarely people would say, hey, I'm not going to be on video today, but they would make a mention of it. Otherwise, it's just something we all do.
Yeah.
And this is very interesting. I believe, at least in the tech world, people are more introverts than extroverts. I am way more comfortable in remote world because in real life you have to do eye contact all the time. You cannot move your eyes. But all of the tech world is like seriously introverted people, and we do screen share all the time. So and Zoom hides after the four boxes, so you don't see everyone's uh, dress codes or dresses or t-shirt. But now in our team, like everyone is so relaxed. You don't even need to wear a shoes in your house, right? You don't need to dress up. I think the time to go to office, because it's sort of, as for some companies, like a catwalk. You need to constantly dress up with the best thing you have, and you're trying to be different every day. uh, but in remote world, you just take a t-shirt, put it in, like it's so relaxing, I think, for everyone. And everyone is so get used to opening their videos after, like, I will say 2-3 weeks, and we didn't ever hear a complaint about it.
One thing I've noticed in my own world is that when I'm on video, I sometimes just audio only, I'm more focused, honestly, than if I had the video on. Because when the video's on, usually if you're sitting there talking to somebody, you're not also seeing yourself. Like even like in this feed, like I'm looking at myself and trying to avoid that, so I don't try to fix my hair and figure out what I need to look like, or if something's on my teeth or something like that. And so I'm so focused also on staring at the camera instead of staring at the screen. Then that also kind of distracts. And I'm also looking at the screen and everything else, kind of like Sahan was saying, like I'm going to do a screen share, so I have something else. And it's very easy for me to just open up a new tab and think of something to do. So sometimes being audio only, or specifically like just doing a phone call, is one of a way that I can focus a little bit more on. Sometimes, mostly I try the video, but not as much.
I think it's interesting because the danger with the camera being off is those meetings that you don't actually think that you're doing, is people are multitasking. So you're saying it helps you to be more focused. And what's interesting, I had, even prior to COVID, there were certain coaches who say that they only did voice, and they felt that audio gave them so much more information than sort of seeing people on a camera. And then there were sort of other coaches, it was like, we do face-to-face stuff. And so some people say it's more focused. On the other hand, we've been working with the team, and they very honestly said, if I turn the camera off and then I start multitasking, and they had too many meetings, that was their problem that they came with. And it was basically, stop going to those meetings. It's better that you stop going to those meetings and actually do your work properly than to be sitting there pretending you're there. And this is part of the culture that they had when they were face-to-face. You have to attend every meeting, but there were less meetings. They moved into a virtual world. There's more meetings, as we've been talking, and then they had no time to actually do their work. So trying to change this culture was part of it. But yeah, interesting how the cultures differ or on that in different groups. As you say, it's meeting different people's needs. There's not probably one right answer.
Good. Let's move ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
And one thing, and I'll just shut up after this. It's really important that we remember we're humans. And I know I've said that before, but I'm going to say it again. Like, we don't go to dinner with people and not look at them. We don't sleep with someone and not look at them. Well, maybe we do, but it's not to be said for Sahin smiles. Like, the fact that I see him smiling is really important to me, and it makes me feel good. You know what I mean? And Grant, I understand the video and non-video thing and the uncertainty of it, but it's really important for people to be human. And we at work let people be human, because people are struggling right now. They need human connection. And even as we get past COVID and we move into this new hybrid world, it's going to be really important that we see body language. Like, the reason we have 5 senses is because we use those 5 senses to help us make decisions. It's really important that we see body language. It's really important for me to see Neil saying "shut up" so I can move on. Like, all that stuff is really important. If I was just on the audio call, I wouldn't see that. So the video, to me, I just wanted to get my point in here, is really, really important, A, and B, let people be who they are. They're humans outside of work. Again, don't make them inhuman when they go to work.
Interesting. Well, we'll leave that one slightly unresolved on video versus no video, but a lot of good opinions there. Jane, I'm going to go over to you to introduce the topic you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, I hated talking about inclusivity because it was an interesting one that came up when we were debating it. And a lot of places are moving to hybrid meetings. There's going to be some people in the office and there's going to be some people who are not. How are we going to make sure that these meetings are inclusive, that the people who are on the end of the video are also going to have their opinions seen and heard in a meeting? And just in case you were thinking of the answer I don't like is that when you come to the office, to keep a level playing field, as people have said, you also join remotely. So we're going to have all these big office spaces with everybody. They've come to the office so they can, have some social connection and collaborate. And instead, they're going to sit there with their headphones on, talking to a screen the whole time. So I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts about the general topic about inclusivity of people who are working remotely and in person, and how you're going to manage that.
So
good one. I know. Yeah, Jason, jump in.
No, I was just going to say, Jane, it's such a brilliant topic, and I'm so glad you asked the question. And it's one that I think of us right now as actors in a movie in 2021. And we're creating what that looks like. In 2025, we're going to look back and say, what did these people do? Because we're all experimenting. I'm going to a conference where I'm speaking, and it's a only in-person conference. That's easy. I'm going to a conference to speak where it's in person, but it's also going to be hybrid.
Yeah.
That's hard.
It's hard.
Mm-hmm. And we have a lot of norms that we've built up over time when it comes to office culture, or if we've only been hybrid or digital culture, that we're going to have to think about how do we adapt. Okay. So, it's, once again, I hate to keep using the word intentionality around digital culture, but to me, it's the key word, intentionality and adaptation, which is unlearning. I can't just look for the people that happen to be around my office to think about just including those people. I have to think differently about that larger team. I can't just think about the people who aren't in the office, because then the people that do come in are going to feel different. So I think that your topic is the biggest, in my personal opinion, is the biggest challenge. It's the biggest thing that we have to tackle when it comes to this. And it's the thing that we're all building together. I know that's not an answer, but I've yet to see an organization say, we've got this, Jane. We've got this. We're learning in what we call we don't talk about the future of work. We talk about the now of work. We're learning right now in the now of work what that looks like.
I don't have a good answer as well, Jane, and this is going to be really hard. I think we have to learn this as we go along. At this point in time, I think it's a brilliant question. No good answer.
Jane, you've said it well, because I heard a lot of that advice. I probably gave some of that advice, which is specific to a meeting. Okay, if one person's remote, then everyone needs to be on a laptop or something like that, so they don't feel like there's two different meetings going on. But that does look extremely ridiculous to walk in and see a group of people in the same office with their backs to each other, having the same meeting without being able to interact with each other. So I do feel like we're going to look back on that and be yeah, that was not the best answer. Maybe it was a stopgap type thing.
Well, it was interesting because it reminded me, I had a coaching client and she changed jobs and she was absolutely hating the culture where she worked. And one of the examples, I said, so tell me, what's about this new company you don't like the culture? She said, for example, in my old company, when, there was an international company, she used to work for Nestle, so all around the world. The 5 or 6 of us who were in the office in Switzerland, we'd go and book a meeting room together. So we're all together on one of these big conference calls. This other company, we all just go and sit on our own desk still and have them. Nobody comes together physically. It's because the team, and in her view, it was because the team don't really like each other and don't really like socializing. And, so she just didn't feel part of a team. So even the occasion, so interesting to see. And then, come now and we're sort of in this situation, it's and then this is the advice. You go into the office and I've got a husband sitting there and trying to get him out of the house. I mean, God's sake, it's been ages since, we've had had, lockdowns and all the time that the office goes back and, backwards and forwards. And I'm like, when are you going to the office? Well, there's no point. If I'm going to go to the office, he works in an international team, I'm just going to be sitting there with my headphones on, and it's going to be worse than home. And the coffee tastes horrible there too, So I'm like, oh, bloody hell, am I ever going to get a day at home by myself, back to my home office and in peace and quiet? So, it's an interesting conundrum, I think, as to how we manage to work that. And I've been looking around for it about, these things, have an extra moderator who thinks about the remote people. And maybe we need that till we time out, till people who are leading the meeting. But it does make me think we're going to have to be a lot more intentional about our meetings as well. Coming back to your word, Jason, intentional and adapting to our meeting cultures.
Whenever we talk about remote, whatever it is, I think we should really remember like how amazing things it opens for us. Like number one, time. Time is the most important thing in the world. We cannot collect time, so we save maybe hours of our daily life, not just going to the office. And when you think about it, we have four walls, and you have to go somewhere to get paid, okay? And to go out, you need to get permission. It doesn't call office; we call it prison. Like we tell, and people in prison makes money too. Government has to pay them based on the law. So offices are whatever we put outside. We built the most amazing. It's a prison because you have to be there for 8 hours a day, which is 1/3 of your life. And we can talk about all the performance stuff that's gonna add us, but in reality, I go to so many offices and I don't see smiley people in life. But working is very rare. Like I look at people in the subways, I look at people in San Francisco, and these guys are averagely making under $50,000 a year. So, and they have to live in apartments because if you want to be close to Twitter office, you have to pay 40% of your savings to your making to rent. Like the whole system is built on offices that you have to go somewhere to make money is absolutely ridiculous. And now we totally change that. So we need to say we are not going to offices. It adds so much value to our life. It adds so much opportunities, like how we can build a better system without all the norms, all the random stuff we need to do. Like salespeople need to wake up at 6 a.m. Like in US airports are packed in the mornings, and you say salespeople can't spend time with their kids and have tried to travel. It's so sad. Now he spends time in the morning with his kids and started to take meetings at 10 a.m. And then we can optimize the whole experience. But every time we talk, we need to think like how many amazing benefits it bring, and we don't smell gas anymore, which
Yeah, I agree with you totally. And one idea that I heard, which I thought was really good, is, however, if we're always remote, yes, we save all that time, but then we crave that social connection. And they were talking about what they call a village co-working space. So rather than having to commute, but you still have these places to go to. I mean, I have a lovely coffee shop at the end of my street. But it because it's got very thick walls, these old buildings here in Europe, the internet is absolute crap. And I'm like, and there's not really, there's lots of sometimes, various people there. It's not sometimes working people. It's close to a school as well. So you get the sort of non-working people there having screaming kids. So, but I thought that was a really cool concept. But we need to shift our thinking, because what I think happened to start with is people stopped commuting, and then they just started working at the time that they would be commuting. And one of the clients I was working with is basically, we were doing a lot of work on well-being through the coronavirus times, and I see they took up on the idea when we were brainstorming that somebody had that basically, I'm not booking in meetings as to what would have been my commuting time. Previously, you wouldn't have been able to get hold of me between 8 o'clock and 9. Now you still can't get hold of me so that I can meditate or do whatever I like, because otherwise previously they'd just sunk into starting their work at 8 o'clock in the morning and lengthening out that work day. So it comes back to is we need to think and redesign things, village co-working spaces, thinking about the time we use and not just fall back into the habits that we always have and sort of translate them there.
Yeah, I love this. We're rebuilding, we're rethinking, we're being intentional, all sorts of great stuff. Grant, let me throw this question specifically to you that Jane brought up. You don't have offices. Is there anything that would compel you to say, let me open up a few little satellites here or there where some people can be there? Or is it like, that's because we said like a digital meeting is much easier than a hybrid meeting, and that's adding a lot of complexity. Do you have anything that would make you want to do that?
Our whole organizational structure is based on our belief that like Jane's question can't be solved. And that's probably not actually true, but we've always said hybrid just sucks. And so we're going to have either all remote or all in person all the time. I don't think it's interesting because we have people all over the country and people have spontaneously said like, oh, we're all in Texas, like let's get together. We're all in Michigan. And that has been very cool. And people have just done it by themselves. And we have a retreat once a year, which we in non-COVID times is all in person. And so I think that there's a huge amount of value to having met someone in person at least once. And we're thinking about like, how do we facilitate that more? So especially with new people, if someone joins and then the retreat's not for a whole another year, that's a while. But that once you have met once, you understand the nuances of the person better, you can interact better, and then all your future virtual interactions are better. And you might be like almost inoculated against needing another in-person experience for like a year or a while. Not that it's a bad thing, it's a great thing, but it's difficult to do logistically.
And there is one thing that is, I think, so important that I think we sometimes missing it. Some person in industrial age decided that we have 8 hours work, 8-hour family, and 8 hours sleep, which is fine. But they had to do it like synchronously, bulk. You need to go and work for 8 hours. But now, and I don't know what people do. Like you need to take your kid to the dentist, you have to get permissions. It's ridiculous. But now we don't need to work 8 hours bulk anymore. So I wake up early in the morning, I do 2 hours, then have breakfast with my kids, come here again, work, go to a coffee shop and do some stuff and also work before I sleep. But because I don't need to work 8 hours straight anymore. And I think that is the biggest freedom of our minds ever since the industrial age. So, and for us, what we see in the working, because it creates so much efficiency, people like come together whenever they feel that connection. They come together. I live in this city. Let's meet together. And when they meet, it's not work related. It's just purely doing human to human connection. And I really see a lot of benefits in the work environment when they come together and go for a hiking, take river in Austin or meet in Istanbul. It's so important. And we should also do like coming together and doing a lot of events like Grant is saying. Like it's so important. We never did it, but we should do it.
All right, I'm going to turn it over.
Just one remark, Neil.
Yeah,
interesting to note that the office does not have to mean what it did, right? It probably cannot mean that as well. It can just be a physical space, and then it doesn't have to be a place with desks where we go to 9 to 5 and do stuff. So it can mean so many different things depending upon what an organization wants to do with a physical space.
That's a really good point. All right, Jason, why don't you take over for us? What do you want us to talk about next?
So one of the things that I think is really interesting about this whole digital culture is what the impact of the length of time of the pandemic has had on culture. And, do we just snap back into where we were? There's a great study I was reading just the other day about how on average to build a habit, it takes 18 to 254 days. But on average, for that to become normal is 66 days. And if you think about how long we've been living in this remote world, like it's now the way we are. Like we're much beyond 66 days. We're well beyond the 254 days. So thinking about that, for all of these people that say, when are we going to go back to normal? it actually makes my skin crawl. And I'd really love your thoughts on when we think about creating this new digital culture. Is it just, hey, we're going to go back to normal as soon as everyone's vaccinated? Or are we really in a position where we have to take this opportunity to change?
Oh, that's a great question. I really believe because now every human is dealing with so much other stuff, like we are in a pandemic and also trying to work, we are not finding the best solutions. But once we hope everyone is vaccinated and we are turning into the normal world, there will be so many people in the company, and I witnessed this in some companies as well. Like there is no way I'm going back to work, and there will be some people. Hell no, my home is not compatible for remote work. Like I have 2 bedrooms with 5 kids. Like I need to figure out this thing. So once everyone is more relaxed in general as humanity, we're gonna find great hybrid solutions. We always do. Humans always do find solution, but we just have so much going right now every single day, and it's not just ending, but it's gonna end one day, we hope. Until like, so in that case we're gonna find great solutions that will work with different kind of people.
I agree there. I think, and people are not going to accept going back to normal. I think the firms which have come out and said you have to go back to the office, they will start facing, when you were already seeing the talent shortage come back in, those people that don't want to go back to the office will resign. So we're hearing a lot about the great resignation. And we need to look at things in a different way and see what's working and not what's not working, not just try and get back to the way it was. Interestingly, I read some things about people saying that they really do feel that their social skills over the time of the pandemic have got worse. They're not so good at doing small talk and things like that. So your comment about building up habits and things like that, I mean, it's two things there, is that, perhaps you do lose some of those skills. And the other thing is, to start with, some of these trips are incredibly stressful. The first business travel trip that I did was, have I got the right injections? Have I got the right forms? Much, much longer queues to check in, to go through the airport. All these sorts of things are creating additional stress at the moment. So along with the habits that have been, it was nice, and the additional stress, it does make you want to just retreat back into the safety of your home at the moment.
We always forget that once you have a remote culture, you don't need to hire people in that city anymore. Your world is your new talent pool, and this is what we should think about it as well. Like, if we are not returning back, if we will not have an office, then the companies will say, I don't need to hire people in New York anymore. I can hire people from Turkey, from Europe, from India, from Mexico. And I think that will create so many opportunities for so many people. And I am so excited about that.
Yeah, Sahil, it's such a brilliant statement. I mean, we say the geographic lottery's been shattered. You happen to live in the right place and you won the geographic lottery because you can get a job at Apple. Now you can get a job at Apple anywhere in the world. And that was starting, but now more than ever, it's there. And I think that it goes back to that concept of adaptability, Jane, that you talked about, and unlearning, is that we just have a lot of, and I'm in that age group where I'd be considered one of them, old leaders that don't think different. And I guess it's not maybe by age, it's even, it's across the board, people that don't think different. And I think that if right now, if HR and organizations don't see this as the opportunity to think different about how they work and about how they allow their people to be human at work, there's never going to be an opportunity like this to create this type of culture change ever again in our lifetimes.
Good point. Yeah.
Yeah, totally agree. And I like what you said earlier too about just the days it takes to make a habit. I was doing a session on last week with some CEOs who were talking about trying to build a hybrid model right now. and the conversation centered on the fact that like, if you want people to come back to the office, like you need to sell them on that now. Like, it's not just, you can just tell them they need to come back. Like, it's got to be a why, and it's got to be very compelling, because like you said, we're kind of set in our ways a little bit now. And this is comfortable. We've gotten used to it. We know things. Obviously, there's other exceptions to it, but if you really want people in the office regularly, then you need to sell people on it and tell them why, and it's got to be compelling, and they have to be able to believe it, because they're used to what the other position that they're in. Good. Well, let's Sahil, I'll let you kind of close out our discussion here. I would love if you would maybe even just chime in about, you talked about different cultures, different countries the people are coming in. That's something that you probably have a lot more experience than the rest of us have, about how to build culture internationally with people who don't have maybe like a shared background.
Yeah, this is such a good thing. Like, if you look at all the problems that humanity has when it comes to the racism, sexism, discrimination, and it's only one reason: location. Because you came from India, you came from Ireland in the old days. In like, if you are Irish in US, you had a little problem. You came from Africa, you came from this. It's all location based, if you think about it, because location was describing the culture, how we live together, like our norms. But now, because we don't have location anymore, everyone is in 100% equal distance. So the best thing that we do is we have really great new cultural norms that we created, like our values in the company, and things like servicing the customer, building the best products, be the best self, become a self-taught, like things like that. And we constantly communicate these things to each other. And now, instead of we turn the cultural differences as this discrimination environment, we turn it into, let's learn about your culture and have fun and learn very interesting things. So when you have someone in Africa, someone in Turkey, their holidays are so different than your holidays. So we allow people to constantly tell their cultural thing to each other, and people learn. And the more we learn, the more inclusive we have. And now I think, because the location is gone, like, we are way open to different cultures, because maybe I'm using an avatar. It doesn't matter anymore how we look, how we talk, how we dress. It's gone. It's totally gone. Everyone is same location, dress whatever. So it will open up so many openness and warming heartness, I call it, and it will allow us to learn way more cultures. But we just need to embrace it. So what we do, we fully embrace it.
Lavanya, you also have several different nationalities working with you. You want to chime in your experience?
Sure. We also did a lot of hiring in the last year and a half, and that's been the biggest advantage of remote. We now had access to talent across the world. People could work from wherever they are, and that's definitely opened things up. It's also been a lot of learning. So I think we're consciously, trying to talk to people about cultural intelligence and what do we need to be mindful of. We work with people across regions and across cultures. So it's opened up different ways of thinking. We've had to create awarenesses, because it was earlier, Indians and, some people in the US and few people in Europe, but now we're pretty much across several regions in the world. So.
Grant, from your side, if I'm not mistaken, you guys are all US based, right?
We're all US based, yeah, which is, it's great hearing these things. We've always worried about time zones primarily, and that being difficult with communication. And actually, to be honest, like legal considerations with hiring people, I'm sure it's obviously possible. We just haven't figured it out yet. But it's interesting, because we always thought about, similar to what Sahin said, we have this great advantage being remote. We're not hiring in one city, we're hiring in a whole country. But based on your experiences, there's definitely a next level of that, which is hiring from the whole world. So it's something we got to figure out.
Jane, you're also quite international yourself. Any thoughts about building an international culture within a company?
Yes, I think there it comes down to, as Lavanya was saying, understanding the differences between culture, and it's not about creating a uniform culture in your company, but understanding what those differences are. So, and what Sahin said, as you get to know people as people, and not as a Pakistani or an Indian or whatever the case may be. On the other side, I also see that digital probably not so much in the workplace, has contributed to the broader polarizations between groups, however. A lot on social media, and I probably not a debate for this type of thing, but basically, somehow with the social media feeding you news that you're used to seeing and thought and opinion, we actually in some ways have become more polarized as a world. And so, Sahin's, let's get to know each other, human to human, person to person, is such an important message, because I feel there's a counter stream happening there on social media, which tries to paint certain groups as, in quite simple black and white terms, good and bad and those sorts of things. So it's so important to try and find ways that we meet people in digital context for both work and non-work places, where we're really talking person to person.
And Neil, if I could just jump in, I mean, this is really where empathy comes into play. Because this is not, our world right now is not one world. When we're dealing with the multiple pandemics we're dealing with around public health and social justice, every place in the world is at a different point. And if we come across with one message, because we happen to be based in the US, to a group of people in India, or a group of people in Australia and New Zealand, as in my firm, or a group of people in Brazil, we're tone deaf. And there's not a faster way to kill your culture than to be tone deaf to the empathetic human that, hey guys, I mean, I've had this happen multiple times to me where people have said, now that the coronavirus is over, we can go back to normal. I mean, we have places in the world where people can't leave their homes. So that international, that geographic component that you bring up is really, really, it's more important than ever, because, not just our economy is different and not just our social justice issues different, but where the virus is, where the pandemic is at a completely different spot in every point in the world.
Yeah. It is tough. And Jane, I appreciate you bringing up the element of the paradox of the digital world, which both connects us in ways that we've never been able to before and opens up so many opportunities, but also has the potential to divide us. Some of that may be even linked to the whole idea of keyboard courage, or just being able to just say what you want in certain platforms and not genuinely build those connections with other people. So it is difficult to figure out. And I, as much as I respect and love things like what Sahin's doing with international teams, getting to know everyone else, I also like companies that are focused on regional and say, look, my region, whether it be a specific state or region within your country or something like that, maybe is less developed, or there's certain parts of it that are less developed, and say, look, I'm going to focus on providing jobs for this specific area. I was on a call earlier today where people were talking about they had moved within their state just to more rural areas and how it improved their quality of life. And it was cool to see that, and to see that focus that was there too. Well, we are coming to the end of our time. There's a few questions that have come in that we just don't have time for, but are definitely interesting, that are there. So if you're on YouTube, check those out. Sahin, Jane, Jason, Lavanya, Grant, thank you all so much for being on this call and for participating in this. We covered a lot of ground, and I'm really excited to be able to share what we talked about today.
Well, thank you. It's
Thank
a
you.
real pleasure to be here. Thank you so much. And thanks for everyone for sharing their ideas. They were brilliant thoughts.
Okay, well, the bells are ringing, so it's time to leave. But thanks you all.
Was it a real bell?
It's got to be Jane.
It was the Zurich bells, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's gotta be in Zurich,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, see you all.
Thanks,
Bye.
guys.